8 hours of sleep, 3 solid meals, no red flags, and still waking up with a stomach that feels like it's running behind on a project it didn't agree to. Bloated before noon, sluggish after lunch, tired in a way that coffee doesn't really fix. Most people assume that's just life or stress. Or maybe they need a new probiotic. But a lot of the time, it comes down to a few quiet patterns that are quietly working against your digestive system. Not dramatic things, not anything you'd read on a warning label. Just small, everyday habits that stack up and nudge your gut in the wrong direction without you noticing. Today we're talking about 4 of them, what the research actually says, and what you can do about it without overhauling your entire lifestyle. Let's start with timing. Your gut has a clock, and you might be ignoring it. There's a concept researchers call circadian rhythm. Most people know it in the context of sleep, but it turns out your digestive system runs on its own internal schedule too. Studies published in journals like Gastroenterology and Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology have confirmed that the gut has its own set of biological clocks, coordinated with your master body clock, that control motility, digestion speed, and even how well your intestinal lining holds together across the day. During daylight hours, your gut is primed to process food. Enzyme activity is higher. Gut movement is faster. Your whole digestive system is in something closer to go mode. At night, the opposite happens. Colonic movement slows significantly. The gut shifts into a quieter, more repair-focused state. And yet, most of us eat our biggest, heaviest meal right before bed. After a full day of running around, dinner becomes the main event, then a snack, then something small while watching TV at 10 p.m. The science here is pretty consistent. Eating late at night can disrupt these biological rhythms in the gut, affecting digestion, intestinal barrier function, and even immune activity. It's not just about calories or what you ate. It's about when the gut was asked to do that work. You don't have to eat dinner at 5 o'clock and become a person who goes to bed at 8. But giving yourself a reasonable window of time between your last meal and when you sleep is one of the simpler things you can do to let your gut follow its own natural schedule. What you're feeding your gut matters more than you think, and not in the way you expect. There are roughly 38 trillion microorganisms living in your digestive tract right now. That is not a typo. They help ferment fiber. They produce compounds that support your intestinal lining. They interact with your immune system in ways researchers are still mapping out. And here's the key part. Different species feed on different things. Research from groups including the American Gut Project found that people who eat 30 or more different plant foods per week tend to have more microbially diverse guts than people eating fewer types. Not necessarily more food, just more variety. That makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Your gut microbiome is essentially a population of very picky eaters. Feed them the same 5 foods every week, and some of them have nothing to eat. Feed them a wider range, and more of them thrive. The relevant science here involves short-chain fatty acids, compounds that your gut bacteria produce when they ferment dietary fiber. These molecules, particularly one called butyrate, do things like strengthen your intestinal lining, help regulate inflammation, and support immune function. Research published in International Journal of Molecular Sciences and multiple PubMed reviews has documented this pathway in detail. The practical takeaway is not complicated. You don't need exotic foods. You don't need to count anything. Rotate your vegetables through the week. Throw different grains or legumes into meals you already make. Try a fruit you haven't bought in 6 months. The goal isn't perfection. It's just a little more variety than last week. Fermented foods are genuinely interesting, but probably not for the reason you've been told. You've likely heard that fermented foods are good for the gut. What's actually behind that claim is worth understanding. A well-cited 2021 dietary intervention study found that people who increased their fermented food intake showed greater gut microbiome diversity, and that this correlated with a reduction in several inflammation markers in the blood. The foods included things like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, and fermented vegetables, nothing particularly exotic. The mechanism isn't fully understood yet, and scientists are still debating exactly how much of the benefit comes from live microbes versus the compounds produced during fermentation. But the direction of the evidence is fairly consistent. Fermented foods seem to have a meaningful, measurable effect on the microbiome environment. Eating a spoonful of kimchi once a week won't rescue a diet that's otherwise low in fiber and variety. Fermented foods seem to work best when they're part of a broader pattern that already includes enough plant diversity to give those microbes something to work with. Think of it like adding guests to a dinner party. They still need something to eat when they arrive. There's one more thing almost nobody mentions, and it's genuinely underrated: water. Not in a drink 8 glasses a day kind of way, because that number is more myth than medicine, but in a more fundamental sense. Your gut actually needs fluid to move things along. The colon absorbs water from the material passing through it. If you're consistently underhydrated, that material becomes harder and slower to move. Gut motility drops. Things back up. And that backed up feeling tends to create a ripple effect that makes everything else feel worse too. Here's the part most people miss though. It's not just about how much you drink. It's about what you drink alongside food. Research suggests that fluids consumed with meals don't impair digestion the way some old advice claimed, but consistently going long stretches without much fluid at all, especially on days with higher fiber intake, can slow things down noticeably. The simplest version of this? If you're adding more fiber and plant variety to your diet, which, based on everything above, you probably should be, your gut is going to need more water to handle it comfortably. One habit that tends to help is keeping something to drink nearby during meals and in the hour or two after. Not because of some rigid rule, but because most people who think they're eating well and still feeling sluggish are quietly, consistently underhydrated. It's one of the dullest explanations in health, and one of the most frequently overlooked. Your nervous system and your gut are in constant conversation. Stress is not just in your head. This one tends to surprise people. There is a well-documented, bidirectional communication pathway between the brain and the gut. Researchers call it the gut-brain axis. It runs through the vagus nerve, through hormonal signaling, and through the immune system. What this means practically is that when your stress levels rise, the effects show up in the gut, sometimes quickly, sometimes gradually. The sympathetic nervous system, the part that activates during perceived stress, inhibits gut motility. It shifts blood flow away from digestion. It can increase gut permeability and alter the balance of the microbiome over time. Research published in the Journal of Physiology described how both acute and chronic stress produce wide-ranging changes across the gut-brain axis, and how these changes can increase susceptibility to digestive discomfort and symptoms. This is why many people notice their stomach acting up during busy or anxious periods, even if they haven't changed what they're eating. The part that feels unfair is that most modern stressors are not the kind you can outrun or solve quickly. Emails, deadlines, the low-grade, background hum of having too much to think about. You don't have to meditate for 40 minutes before breakfast, but small things that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest side of the equation, do seem to have a measurable effect. Slow, deliberate breathing before a meal, a few minutes away from a screen, eating without multitasking, even occasionally. None of it sounds especially transformative, but given how tightly the gut and brain are wired together, it's probably more useful than whatever supplement is trending this week. The honest summary: none of this is complicated, which is slightly annoying if you were hoping for a dramatic breakthrough. Eat in alignment with daylight daylight hours when possible. Give your gut a reasonable overnight break. Add variety to what you eat. Not more, just different. Your microbiome responds to novelty in ways that matter. Include fermented foods as part of a broader diet, not as a standalone fix. Take the gut-stress connection seriously. The research supports it, even if it's less satisfying than buying something. And don't forget the basics. If you're increasing fiber and variety, drink enough water to let your gut actually handle it. The interesting thing about gut health is that most of it responds to patterns over time, not to any single heroic effort. It's quiet, cumulative, and slightly boring, which is probably why it works. One change, done consistently, matters more than 5 changes you abandon in 10 days. Start where it feels manageable. That's usually the right place. If this was useful, let me know in the comments which of these you're already doing and which one feels most realistic to start with. And if you want more breakdowns like this, subscribing helps me keep making them. Thanks for watching.